Chapter 55 of the monstrous pictures of whales. I shall ere long paint to you, as well as one can without canvas, something like the true form of the whale, as he actually appears to the eye of the whaleman, when in his own absolute body the whale is moored alongside the whale ship, so that he can be fairly stepped upon there. It may be worth while, therefore, previously, to advert to those curious imaginary portraits of him, which even down to the present day confidently challenge the faith of the landsman. It is time to set the world right in this matter, by proving such pictures of the whale all wrong. It may be that the primal source of all those pictorial delusions will be found among the oldest Hindu, Egyptian, and Grecian sculptures. For ever since those inventive but unscrupulous times, when on the marble panellings of temples, the pedestals of statues, and on shields, medallions, cups, and coins, the dolphin was drawn in scales of chain armor like Saladin's, and a helmeted head like St. George's. Ever since then has something of the same sort of license prevailed, not only in most popular pictures of the whale, but in many scientific presentations of him. Now, by all odds, the most ancient extant portrait, anyways purporting to be the whale's, is to be found in the famous cavern pagoda of Elephanta in India. The Brahmins maintain that in the almost endless sculptures of that immemorial pagoda, all the trades and pursuits, every conceivable avocation of man, were prefigured ages before any of them actually came into being. No wonder, then, that in some sort our noble profession of whaling should have been there shadowed forth. The Hindu whale referred to occurs in a separate department of the wall, depicting the incarnation of Vishnu in the form of Leviathan, learnedly known as the Matsya Avatar. But though this sculpture is half man and half whale, so as only to give the tail of the latter, yet that small section of him is all wrong. It looks more like the tapering tail of an anaconda than the broad palms of the true whale's majestic flukes. But go to the old galleries and look now at a great Christian painter's portrait of this fish, for he succeeds no better than the antediluvian Hindu. It is Guido's picture of Perseus rescuing Andromeda from the sea monster or whale. Where did Guido get the model of such a strange creature as that? Nor does Hogarth, in painting the same scene, in his own Perseus descending, make out one whit better. The huge corpulence of that Hogarthian monster undulates on the surface, scarcely drawing 1 inch of water. It has a sort of howdah on its back, and its distended tusked mouth, into which the billows are rolling, might be taken for the Traitor's Gate leading from the Thames by water into the Tower. Then there are the prodigious whales of old Scotch Sibbald and Jonah's whale, as depicted in the prints of old Bibles and the cuts of old primers. What shall be said of these? As for the bookbinder's whale, winding like a vine stalk round the stalk of a descending anchor, as stamped and gilded on the backs and title pages of many books, both old and new, that is a very picturesque but purely fabulous creature imitated, I take it, from the like figures on antique vases. Though universally denominated a dolphin, I nevertheless call this bookbinder's fish an attempt at a whale, because it was so intended when the device was first introduced. It was introduced by an old Italian publisher somewhere about the 15th century during the revival of learning, and in those days, and even down to a comparatively late period, dolphins were popularly supposed to be a species of the Leviathan. In the vignettes and other embellishments of some ancient books, you will at times meet with very curious touches at the whale, where all manner of spouts, jets, dew, hot springs, and cold Saratoga and Baden come bubbling up from his unexhausted brain. In the title page of the original edition of the Advancement of Learning, you will find some curious whales. But quitting all these unprofessional attempts, let us glance at those pictures of Leviathan purporting to be sober, scientific delineations by those who know. In old Harris's collection of voyages, there are some plates of whales extracted from a Dutch book of voyages, A.D. 1671, entitled A Whaling Voyage to Spitzbergen, in the ship Jonas, in the whale, Peter Peterson of Friesland Master. In one of those plates, the whales, like great rafts of logs, are represented lying among ice isles, with white bears running over their living backs. In another plate, the prodigious blunder is made of representing the whale with perpendicular flukes. Then again, there is an imposing quarto, written by one Captain Colnett, a post-captain in the English Navy, entitled A Voyage Round Cape Horn into the South Seas, for the purpose of extending the spermaceti whale fisheries. In this book is an outline purporting to be a picture of a physeter, or spermaceti whale, drawn by skill from one killed on the coast of Mexico, August 1793, and hoisted on deck. I doubt not the captain had this veracious picture taken for the benefit of his marines. To mention but one thing about it, let me say that it has an eye which, applied according to the accompanying scale to a full-grown sperm whale, would make the eye of the whale a bow window some 5 feet long. Ah, my gallant captain, why did you not give us Jonah looking out of that eye? Nor are the most contentious compilations of national history, for the benefit of the young and tender, free from the same heinousness of mistake. Look at the popular work Goldsmith's Animated Nature. In the abridged London edition of 1807, there are plates of an alleged whale and a narwhal. I do not wish to seem inelegant, but this unsightly whale looks much like an amputated sow, and as for the narwhal, one glimpse at it is enough to amaze one that in this 19th century such a hippogriff could be palmed for genuine upon any intelligent public of schoolboys. Then again, in 1825, Bernard Germain, Count de Lesseps, a great naturalist, published a scientific, systematized whale book, wherein are several pictures of the different species of the Leviathan. All these are not only incorrect, but the picture of the Mysticetus, or Greenland whale, that is to say, the right whale. Even Scoresby, a long experienced man as touching that species, declares not to have its counterpart in nature. But the placing of the cap sheaf to all this blundering business was reserved for the scientific Frederick Cuvier brothers, to the famous Baron. In 1836 he published a natural history of whales, in which he gives what he calls a picture of the sperm whale. Before showing that picture to any Nantucketer, you had best provide for your summary retreat from Nantucket. In a word, Frederick Cuvier's sperm whale is not a sperm whale, but a squash. Of course, he never had the benefit of a whaling voyage. Such men seldom have. But whence he derived that picture, who can tell? Perhaps he got it as his scientific predecessor in the same field. Demarest got one of his authentic aberrations, that is, from a Chinese drawing. And what sort of lively lads with the pencil those Chinese are, and many queer cups and saucers inform us. As for the sign painters, whales seen in the streets, hanging over the shops of oil dealers, what shall be said of them? They are generally Richard III. Whales with dromedary humps, and very savage. Breakfasting on 3 or 4 sailor tarts, that is, whale boats, full of mariners, their deformities floundering in seas of blood and blue paint. But these manifold mistakes in depicting the whale are not so very surprising after all. Consider. Most of the scientific drawings have been taken from the stranded fish, and these are about as correct as a drawing of a wrecked ship, with broken back, would correctly represent the noble animal itself, in all its undashed pride of hull and spars. Though elephants have stood for their full lengths, the living Leviathan has never yet fairly floated himself for his portrait. The living whale, in his full majesty and significance, is only to be seen at sea in unfathomable waters, and afloat the vast bulk of him is out of sight, like a launched line of battleship. And out of that element is a thing eternally impossible for mortal man to hoist him bodily into the air, so as to preserve all his mighty swells and undulations, and not to speak of the highly presumable difference of contour between a young suckling whale and a full-grown Platonian Leviathan. Yet, even in the case of one of those young suckling whales hoisted to a ship's deck, such is then the outlandish, eel-like, limbered, varying shape of him, that his precise expression the devil himself could not catch. But it may be fancied that from the naked skeleton of the stranded whale accurate hints may be derived touching his true form. Not at all. For it is one of the more curious things about this Leviathan that his skeleton gives very little idea of his general shape. Though Jeremy Bentham's skeleton, which hangs for candelabra in the library of one of his executors, correctly conveys the idea of a burly-browed, utilitarian old gentleman, with all Jeremy's other leading personal characteristics, yet nothing of this kind could be inferred from any Leviathan's articulated bones. In fact, as the great Hunter says, the mere skeleton of the whale bears the same relation to the fully invested and padded animal as the insect does to the chrysalis that so roundingly envelops it. This peculiarity is strikingly evinced in the head, as in some part of this book will be incidentally shown. It is also very curiously displayed in the side fin, the bones of which almost exactly answer to the bones of the human hand, minus only the thumb. This fin has 4 regular bone fingers, the index, middle, ring, and little finger. But all these are permanently lodged in their fleshy covering, as the human fingers in an artificial covering. However, recklessly, the whale may sometimes serve us, said humorous Strub one day. He can never be truly said to handle us without mittens. For all these reasons, then, any way you may look at it, you must needs conclude that the great Leviathan is that one creature in the world which must remain unpainted to the last. True, one portrait may hit the mark much nearer than another, but none can hit it with any very considerable degree of exactness. So there is no earthly way of finding out precisely what the whale really looks like, and the only mode in which you can derive even a tolerable idea of his living contour is by going a whaling yourself. But by so doing, you run no small risk of being eternally stove and sunk by him. Wherefore, it seems to me, you had best not be too fastidious in your curiosity touching this Leviathan. Chapter 56. Of the less erroneous pictures of whales, and the true pictures of whaling scenes. In connection with the monstrous pictures of whales, I am strongly tempted here to enter upon those still more monstrous stories of them, which are to be found in certain books, both ancient and modern, especially in Pliny. Purchas, Hakluyt, Harris, Cuvier, N.C. But I pass that matter by. I know of only 4 published outlines of the great sperm whale: Colnett's, Huggins's, Frederick Cuvier's, and Beale's. In the previous chapter, Colnett and Cuvier have been referred to. Huggins is far better than theirs, but by great odds. Beale is the best. All Beale's drawings of this whale are good, excepting the middle figure in the picture of 3 whales in various attitudes, capping his 2nd chapter. His front piece, boats attacking sperm whales, though no doubt calculating to excite the civil skepticism of some parlourmen, is admirably correct and lifelike in its general effect. Some of the sperm whale drawings in J. Ross Brown are pretty correct in contour, but they are wretchedly engraved. That is not his fault, though. Of the right whale, the best outline pictures are in Scoresby, but they are drawn on to small a scale to convey a desirable impression. He has but one picture of whaling scenes, and this is a sad deficiency, because it is by such pictures only, when at all well done, that you can derive anything like a truthful idea of the living whale as seen by his living hunters. But taken for all in all, by far the finest, though in some details not the most correct, presentations of whales and whaling scenes to be anywhere found, are 2 large French engravings, well executed and taken from paintings by one Garnery. Respectively, they represent attacks on the sperm and right whale. In the first engraving, a noble sperm whale is depicted in full majesty of might, just risen beneath the boat from the profundities of the ocean, and bearing high in the air upon his back the terrific wreck of the stoven planks. The prow of the boat is partially unbroken, and is drawn just balancing upon the monster's spine, and standing in that prow, for that one single, incomputable flash of time, you behold an oarsman, half shrouded by the incensed boiling spout of the whale, and in the act of leaping, as if from a precipice. The action of the whole thing is wonderfully good and true. The half-emptied line tub floats on the whitened sea. The wooden poles of the spilled harpoons obliquely bob in it. The heads of the swimming crew are scattered about the whale in contrasting expressions of affright, while in the black stormy distance the ship is bearing down upon the scene. Serious fault might be found with the anatomical details of this whale, but let that pass. But let that pass, since for the life of me I could not draw so good a one. In the second engraving, the boat is in the act of drawing alongside the barnacled flank of a large running right whale that rolls his back weedy bulk in the sea like some mossy rock slide from the Patagonian cliffs. His jets are erect, full and black like soot, so that from so abounding a smoke in the chimney you would think there must be a brave supper cooking in the great bowels below. Seafowls are pecking at the small crabs, shellfish, and other sea candies, and macaroni, which the right whale sometimes carries on his pestilent back. And all the while the thick-lipped Leviathan is rushing through the deep, leaving tons of tumultuous white curds in his wake, and causing the slight boat to rock in the swells like a skiff caught nigh the paddle wheels of an ocean steamer. Thus the foreground is all raging commotion, but behind, in admirable artistic contrast, is the glassy level of a sea becalmed, the drooping, unstarched sails of the powerless ship, and the inert mass of a dead whale, a conquered fortress, with the flag of capture lazily hanging from the whale pole inserted into his spout hole. Who Garnery the painter is, or was, I know not, but my life for it, he was either practically conversant with his subject, or else marvellously tutored by some experienced whaleman. The French are the lads for painting action. Go and gaze upon all the paintings of Europe, and where will you find such a gallery of living and breathing commotion on canvas as in the triumphal hall at Versailles, where the beholder fights his way pell-mell through the consecutive great battles of France, where every sword seems a flash of the northern lights, and the successive armed kings and emperors dash by like a charge of crowned centaurs. Not wholly unworthy of a place in that gallery are these sea battle pieces of Garnery. The natural aptitude of the French for seizing the picturesqueness of things seems to be peculiarly evinced in what paintings and engravings they have of their whaling scenes. With not 1/10 of England's experience in the fishery, and not the 1,000th part of that of the Americans, they have nevertheless furnished both nations with the only finished sketches at all capable of conveying the real spirit of the whale hunt. For the most part, the English and American whale draughtsmen seem entirely content with presenting the mechanical outline of things, such as the vacant profile of the whale, which, so far as picturesqueness of effect is concerned, is about tantamount to sketching the profile of a pyramid. Even Scoresby, the justly renowned right whaleman, after giving us a stiff full length of the Greenland whale, and 3 or 4 delicate miniatures of narwhals and porpoises, treats us to a series of classical engravings of boat-hooks, chopping knives, and grapnels, and with the microscopic diligence of a Leeuwenhoek submits to the inspection of the shivering world 96 facsimiles of magnified Arctic snow crystals. I mean no disparagement to the excellent voyager. I honor him for a veteran, but in so important a matter, it was certainly an oversight not to have procured for every crystal a sworn affidavit taken before a Greenland justice of the peace. In addition to those fine engravings from Garnery, there are 2 other French engravings worthy of note, by someone who subscribes himself H. Durand. One of them, though not precisely adapted to our present purpose, nevertheless deserves mention on other accounts. It is a quiet noon scene among the isles of the Pacific, a French whaler anchored inshore in a calm, and lazily taking water on board the loosened sails of the ship, and the long leaves of the palms in the background, both drooping together in the breezeless air. The effect is very fine, when considered with reference to its presenting the hardy fishermen under one of their new aspects of oriental repose. The other engraving is quite a different affair. The ship hove to upon the open sea, and in the very heart of the leviathanic life, with a right whale alongside. The vessel, in the act of cutting in, hove over to the monster as if to quay, and a boat hurriedly pushing off from this scene of activity is about giving chase to whales in the distance. The harpoons and lances lie leveled for use. 3 oarsmen are just setting the mast in its hole, while from a sudden roll of the sea the little craft stands half erect out of the water, like a rearing horse. From the ship, the smoke of the torments of the boiling whale is going up like the smoke over a village of smithies, and to windward a black cloud, rising up with earnest of squalls and rains, seems to quicken the activity of the excited seamen.